Hello, welcome to the August 2nd, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de or simply asking your question in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, let me just clear my throat. So if you could specify which version you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you could specify which version number, so if you're running 11, 12, 13. In addition to that, which operating system, that information is often helpful. When asking questions, or is it my ability to kind of answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that are in the session. We will go through all of the questions chronologically as they were asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your particular question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. We should have an index of all the topics that are discussed in today's live stream with timestamps, so that we could pin. So the timestamps will be pinned to the comments, so you can navigate directly to that moment in time. And if you wanted to search for other topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we have over 400 live streams. You can go to cubaseindex.com. And Jan from Stockholm has been incredibly gracious and generous with his time to create that website for us. Also, we want to give a special thank. We have special thanks to two people that we have that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to make it a better community experience. Also, we will give a special thanks to an extra special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So if it's a wonderful resource of information that's available for the Steinberg community, a different collection of various tutorials and links that's really helpful. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. area. So if you're on live, or if you're watching it, if you're watching the live stream after the fact, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we had some questions that were submitted earlier from Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Says Cubase 12.07 is giving me issues. I didn't have a 12.06. There's any way I could get an installation of 12.06. So I don't think that there is any that are available to download. It's usually the latest versions are the ones that are available to download. If you had 12.06 previously, you may still have the download. If you're on Windows or Mac, if you go to your downloads folder, look under Steinberg, and then you may have the 12.06 update there instead. So you could try that. And all right, but generally, like, the updates that are available are always going to be the latest versions. All right, so next question from Taylor. It says, my Cubase 12.07 has stopped showing waveforms in the project window. An empty container is there and the sound plays. What could cause this? Is there a solution? All right, so let's say we have our audio waveforms that we see here, and there is a preference. I think if we come over here to under Event Display and we select Audio, there is a Show Waveforms preference. So let's try, if we do that now, we don't see any particular audio waveforms. So you could check that particular preference, make sure that didn't get unchecked for some reason. Also, the audio waveforms, we could see, if we go to your media menu, we could come right over to not your pool, not the media bay, but rather the pool window. And the pool will have kind of all of the particular files that we see here. And if for some reason, if we scroll over here, we can see the waveform image. So if in the pool, if you don't see the waveform image, what you could do is select the particular audio files in the pool here. So let's say, okay, I want to take these files, and if you right click, there's a kind of a reconstruct image, I think it's called. Yeah, so if we just choose, these all have their particular images, but you could click on reconstruct and then you should see the audio waveform image there. So if it's with all files, I would think that's going to be the preference here under event display audio and show waveforms. If it's like within a particular project, maybe the audio files got moved over, but the image files for the audio files didn't get moved with them, then I would go to your pool window and you could just select, you could select all files, and then you'll see kind of the reconstruct, and that would redraw the waveform image for you. All right, Hood Boy Terry asks, how to fix plugins not playing sounds in the control room monitor. Okay. So I'm not sure if it's like an instrument to plug in. So make sure first that when we're doing this that we have the control room configured correctly. So we're going to come over here to your studio menu, to audio connections, and we'll come over here and make sure that we have a monitor selected. So I have a monitor selected here. And as we do this, I could see that I have this being routed out. So when we say a plugin, I'm not sure if it's an audio plugin or an instrument plugin, but let's say if it's an instrument plugin here. So now all of the audio is going to be routed through the control room. And if you're using the control room, one thing to consider is coming over here and just saying, okay, let's go to the outputs tab, and then you may want to choose for this not to be connected, because that could be going through, that could doubly bus the signal. But then the audio path for the instruments are going through the control room. And if it's a plugin that's, I'll just how to fix a plugin not playing sounds in the control room. If it's, this may be a long shot, but if we have a plugin that's in the control room that's not playing sounds, so here we can't necessarily, if you load up like an instrument or a plugin, but let's say if I just put like a test tone generator in the plugin in the control room, this is generating sounds. But if it's an instrument, the instrument isn't going to, I don't think we could even load instrument effects in the control room. But if it's a plugin that requires like an audio input for routing, then you may not hear it if you're instantiating it in the control room there. So let me know if it's an audio plugin or an instrument plugin, Hood Boy Terry, and we could see if we can get it more focused for response. All right, so we have Tim K checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands, and he says grateful to be joining once again. All right, so we have Majid Bass Groove. Hi Greg, last time we talked about the possibility of creating a transcription of my bass line, but you mentioned that in Cubase Elements the audio to MIDI conversion feature is not available. Now I converted my audio to MIDI by another app and imported it into Cubase Elements, but still unable to make a proper sheet music via score feature. I mean, I couldn't change the treble clef to bass clef. How can I do the clef change in Cubase Element? All right, so we'll come over. I will just put like a quick bass line in here. All right, so let's say now we look at this in our score editor. Sorry, let me just... Okay, so let's say if we are in, if we want to change our treble clef to bass clef for this particular part, just double click on the clef itself, and then you can select different clefs right there. So now we could just come right over here, say, okay, we want this to be our bass clef. So all you have to do again is just simply double click on the clef, and then you can just come right there and see and change the clef as you need it. Great to see Jazz Dude on and Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we have from Indrop. Hi, Greg. The shortcut search in Media Bay function doesn't seem to work for me. I'm using Cubase Pro 13041. Okay, so let's open up the Media Bay. Okay, let's see if I remember. Let me just make sure I have the right key command here. Okay, so Shift F5. So I'll just come here. All right, let me see if I'm out of the media bay, if that makes a difference. Yeah, it seems like the key command isn't working for me as well, so I assume that it would go to this particular field. I'll try a different key command and see if that changes it.
Accessibility shortcuts.
Sorry. Right, and I'll try. Yeah, so it looks like the key command isn't working for me as well, so I'll pass that along. Sorry about that. It's kind of annoying. All right, so we see question, will Cubase ever have a lyric track? Let me clear my throat. So a lot of people will use like lyrics on markers, but there isn't a lyric track. You know, I'm sure anything is possible, you know, as time goes forward, but let's come over and I can show you how I often do lyrics. Okay, so what I often do is just have a marker track. So we'll come over here to visibility, and then I have my lyrics marker track. So I basically have like the lyrics as they're played. And this way, if I'm tracking someone and the singer's like, oh, I want to go to the leave me alone line, I could just come right here and navigate directly to where the lyric is. And I will type the lyrics in the project notepad. So as we come over here, we can see kind of all of the lyrics, and that's stored within the particular project. And then, it's very easy just to come over here and, okay, when we want to drop in a lyric, you could just go to the marker track. And as we, just drop a marker in while holding down the shift key, you could just type in lyrics like that. So most people use a marker track. I realize it's not a dedicated lyric track, but I think it could get you the same functionality pretty easily. All right, great to see Daniel on. We see Jan from CubaseIndex.com on. All right, so we have from Fazy interest, how to change the music scale in chord tracks. Okay, so let's say we have my chord track here. So we're going to say, and we have our scale set. Okay, so if we want to change this, we would select the chord track here, and then we could just say automatic scales. And at this point, we could just come right over here, double click, and then you could change the particular scales to whatever you want. But if this is set to automatic scales, we can't necessarily edit that. So make sure that automatic scales is turned off, and then double click, and then you could edit the scale as you see fit. All right, so we have Ace Amadeus just asking about the for the 400th anniversary code. So I think that the person that's doing it is on vacation, so hopefully I have a meeting with them next week, so hopefully we should get the prize codes out next week. All right, we see Daniel is not going to be able to watch today. All right, so James asks, in Cubase Elements 13, how do I create custom scripts in the MIDI remote using launch key 49? Okay, so let's say I want to come over here to my Chord. We'll go to the MIDI remote. And I will just kind of take this particular script. I'm just going to delete this script and start over. So if you want, basically, what you want to do, if we're going to start from scratch, we're going to click on the plus sign. We're going to add your MIDI script here. So I can say, okay. And I'll just come here. So you could select your, I think it's a Novation controller. Okay, so the launch key, I think it's Novation. So let's just see if that is one of the supported ones. So if you have this set up so this already comes with a particular script, you could set your MIDI in and out ports accordingly. So now that we have this, what we want to do, we could define which particular functions. So you may notice that you have different mapping pages. So when we go to our mapping assistant, one of the things we could do is that we have default controls, but if we just click on the plus symbol, we can now say, okay, we want this to be August 2nd. And now at this point, we can hit the particular function that we want. So we could select the button, and now we could, like, as we want to assign functions to the particular button, so we could hit the button to select that button, and now we could just come over here and apply different mappings for different buttons on the controller. So if you have the Mark III, you should be able to kind of start that very easily, just like that, and customize it. If we have a different controller, so let's come over here, we'll go to our mapping page, and let's say, since I don't have one of these, I'm going to delete this particular script, or we'll disable the script. So if I was starting one from scratch, like if you didn't have the Mark III, what I could do is just come over here. We'll say, we'll add a vendor. I'll call this August 2nd. We give it a model name. Define the MIDI in and out ports. All right, and now what we could do is define, and basically we have knobs, buttons, faders, sliders, trigger pads, pitch bend, modulation wheels. So let's say my fader, I have 8 faders. So I want to come over here. Now what I'm going to do is just simply move fader 1, move fader 2, fader 3, 4, and it's automatically populating 6, 7, 8. So now I have my 8 faders, and at this point we could just say I want to come over to our mapping page. We could say, okay, this is setting out this particular MIDI CC. We could see that, and as we come back, we'll just say, let's come over here. We could double click, and now we could assign the mapping assignments. So I could touch the fader, come over here and say, okay, I want that to be quick control 1, quick control 2, quick control 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now we've assigned our quick control, we've assigned our assignments to our quick control. So as we would come over and open up, let's say, a particular plugin, we can just come over, let's say, I'll just go to my vocal here, and we open up this particular track. We can now say, okay, let's come over here to a particular plugin, and now we could assign our quick controls automatically. Will be routed to the plugin or to the track, whatever we want set up. So you can use a script. There's probably scripts available for most controllers that you could download if you look in the Steinberg.net forums, or you could make your own script in a matter of minutes and then customize it. And when you go to the mapping, you click on the plus sign, and then you could have one script that does something else, have a different mapping page. And each mapping page could take the same controllers and assign different functions. So if you want one mapping page for editing versus tracking versus mixing, you could just simply switch the functionality of the particular controller to do what you want. Wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. All right, great to see Parabot too. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, we see Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Sounds like a good place to be. All right, so Daniel Dimitru asks, hello, Greg. I have a macro key with offline processing. The first is loudness normalization. The second is peak normalization. They are set in favorite 1 and favorite 2 with the key command. But only the first process works. The other one does not apply. Thanks. Okay, so let's go give it a try. Let me just do a new project here. Okay, so let's come over to our direct offline processing. All right, and I'm going to delete my favorites here. Okay, so we'll have normalization. So we'll come over here, process. All right. Okay, so this is the first is loudness normalization. Okay. And then the second function is peak normalization. Okay, here, let me just... All right, so it's loudness and then peak. All right, let me just... I'll just do difference here. Okay, so this is loudness at minus 14 lufs, and let's say this is peak at minus 18. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go to my MIDI remote and let's trigger. All right, so we'll call this favorite one. We'll apply the mapping. So that looked like it worked to me. So make sure that you select both of them, but that's gonna. So let's say now if I come here, let's delete the first process and let's delete this process. So we can see that both of those processes took effect. So again, now I could just come right over there and that is done. So if I take this process out, we should see it get a little softer, I think. Yeah, so those two are working independently of each other. So again, just come here, trigger this with a key command or the MIDI remote, and each of those processes can be deleted independently. So it went through both processes there. So let me know if you, when you had both the processes, that you kind of dragged them down as a multi-step process for your favorites. So let me know if you did that, where you'll see this kind of cascaded when you see multiple functions versus a single function, or if we drag that down, we see just the rectangle, but here we can see kind of indicating that there's multiple processes going on there. So, but that seemed to kind of work as expected for me. Let me know if I did it differently than you did. All right, wonderful to see Mark Rabin on from Montana. We'll give a big woof to Stella. It's wonderful to see Stella on Tuesday's Zoom social meetup. Tim Weinheimer just says he had lots of fun on the Zoom meeting. All right, everyone give Stella some dog treats. All right. So Dennis Rule says, hi Greg, it seems that FL Studio 24 does not work as a VSTI plugin. I'm running Cubase 13 Pro on a Windows 10 PC. Is there some way you can check this? Thanks. So I don't have a license of FL Studio, but I'm sure it's probably easy enough to check to see. I know it used to work as a VST instrument inside of Cubase. I'm not sure if they stopped doing that, and if they did, it would probably be their choice to do. But maybe someone who has both licenses could confirm. All right, Uno Memento sending a big woof to Stella from Finland. All right, and we have Tim K. Tim K's cat Buddy is waving their paw in greetings to Stella. All right, wonderful to see the artist known as Love back. We've missed having you here. And we have Stefan from Sweden checking in. All right, Dwight Cunningham just asked Greg, I noticed that when I launched Cubase 13, sometimes the info bar, the information is not connected, is missing. Is there a reason for that? So if it's like this info bar, it could be that there's no object selected. So if it's this for the info bar, if there's nothing selected, it may not indicate anything, but once an event is selected, this particular info bar shows up. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So see inputs, outputs, info, but here we could see the info bar just here. And there's also, if we have this, we kind of right click, there's the status line. So here we could pick, let me just, if we go to like this little setting here, make sure that you have the status line enabled. on the setup Windows layout as well. See, Mark Raven says he's been a little demotivated, but he's written a bunch of lyrics. So, writing lyrics is a big part of the process. So, and I'm sure you'll come up with a musical composition just to kind of make it all fall together. All right, so we see from Ed Visinor, says feature, ask Cubase if they can allow Premiere Pro sequences to be imported in place of video. Editors could compose and make changes in Premiere and see instantly in Cubase. Huge potential here. Yeah, I'm not sure if Premiere would give Steinberg the access to that. If you do have Nuendo, what you can do, I think that most times, and I could be mistaken, that, the video editing team is different than the, composition and audio post team. But if you're in Nuendo, what you could do is just come over, and there is a reconform function. So what this would allow you to do is basically take the edit decision list, like the original edit decision list, and if there's changes in, if there's been video edits made, we could then import the new edit decision list and automatically reconform that particular, the project to compensate for all of the edit changes. So yeah, Nuendo does offer reconforming. So I'm not sure if that would sneak down into Cubase. It's more of kind of a post-production delineation, which I think makes sense. But if you really need that, consider jumping up to Nuendo, and that way you could work just straight with reconform. So, but we could also ask, you could also ask Premiere to allow them to allow Cubase to be integrated with Premiere as well. See, Mark Raven says, of course, Greg makes it bass clef. He's thinking I'm favoring bass clef because I'm a bassist, personally. All right, wonderful to see Best Korean Jesus on from San Diego. Thanks for making it to the live stream today. Great to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. All right, and we have Zounds by Timo from Wisconsin joining us. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. All right, great to see Terry Gray from Minneapolis, Twin Cities area. So we see Sounds by Timo just asks, is there anything new for video track on Cubase 13 Pro? So the new thing that was kind of added, and this request came from Ludwig Gornson's team, but we'll come over here. Let's import, because they often deal with different video files. So let's say if you have your video here, and let's say, okay, you're composing, and then all of a sudden you do get a picture change. We could just add a new track version. And then without having to kind of redo or make kind of a nightmarish switches, we can, especially when you need to go back and compare, that you could now choose to import a video file again. So let's say, so we could have your different edits showing up as track versions. So if you get a lot of videos where, they're they're still not at picture lock. This way, if there are changes, and it could be like, oh, we took this, 10 seconds out. Oh, we added it back in. We took it out later in the episode in a different cue. So at this point, we could just have video track versions, and that was introduced in 13, I believe. So that was the recent video change with that. All right, great to see George from Seattle. I remember seeing you at American Music in Seattle. All right, and his question is, you mentioned things in Nuendo can do that Cubase can't. Any highlights for what Cubase can do that Nuendo can't? So it used to be that there were some minor differences, but now Nuendo, just for kind of sake of simplicity, has every single feature in Cubase. So there's no unique features in Cubase that's not available in Nuendo. All of the Cubase functionality is in Nuendo if you're at the same version level. But Nuendo will have more. So, it used to be that there were some unique, like some minor features, but now at this point, everything that's in Cubase is in Nuendo, and Nuendo just offers more, such as the reconform, which we just showed. Okay, so Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, when recording a chord pad pattern into a track, can the pattern be set to keep playing each chord until you left click on the next chord so there are no breaks in between chords? So let's give it a shot. It's the active project here. Hang on, let me just adjust my volume up. All right, so I'm going to assign just a quick chord pattern. All right, so let's say if we're recording, all right, so we may have different behavior with the mouse versus the keyboard or just clicking on a pad. So let's say, all right, so now I'm going to switch chords. And I think it's designed to work kind of with the note on, note off message. So if I release the note off, like now, but it may not sustain. So I think it makes sense for it to, and let me just see if there's any preferences for that. So I think, the intention is for it to be kind of played so that when there's a note, you let go of the mouse. So let's say if we're I'll just see if there's any potential settings for that, but I think that it is intended so that if you're, that you can have pauses, and the pauses are, sent by either, holding down the mouse or just with the MIDI keyboard, and if you're using just the MIDI keyboard, it's pretty easy. I can see if you have to go here to there, but if you're using just kind of a MIDI keyboard, and then if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, you could trigger it with with the virtual keyboard and use. So if it's just to kind of get transitions, perhaps use a virtual keyboard or a MIDI keyboard if they're kind of far away and you have like a slight gap. But I think the intention is that you could start and stop and choose when the arpeggio is going by, not where it's in a hold pattern, and I guess if you used a sustain pedal, I don't currently have a sustain pedal connected to my controller, I don't think. So let's see if we use a sustain pedal. I'm not sure if my sustain pedal is working, but I think the intention again is to allow you to pick to play the chords like a musician would approach it by kind of the note on, note off message. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, Ace Amadeus asks, Greg, how do I prevent the left and right locators from moving when I slow down project tempo? So it could really depend on, so let's say if we are here and I have this set for so we're at measure 9, coming over to measure 20. So if I slow down my project tempo, we can see that I'm going to turn off my tempo track here. So we went to 120 beats a minute. If I slow down, let's say to 62 beats a minute, these are at the same time. So if we're dealing with, if we set this in bars and beats, now when we are doing seconds, as we adjust our tempo, because our boundaries are set to seconds, that we will notice that the time change, because as we are slowing the tempo, we are changing how it's going in time. But if we right click here and we set this to bars and beats, at this point, as we adjust the tempo up and down, we're always going to be at the same bar position. So, make sure you don't have your master timeline here set to seconds, because if you adjust the tempo, that would, because the markers are staying in the same time, but as you adjust the tempo, it's going to reflect differently if you're in seconds versus bars and beats for your time display mode. Great to see Parabot on. Great to see Sable Winters on as well. We missed you on the Zoom on Tuesday, but we hope you're doing great. Right, my chat field jumped, so let me get back. Okay, back to where I was. All right, so we have Nesh Beats Official saying hello, so thanks for joining us. Andre Green asked, do you do live chats for beginners? Ask any question, beginner or advanced, and we will gladly answer it. So, what's an advanced question for someone could be a beginner's question for someone else. But whatever questions you have, never hesitate to ask any question. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it today. Wonderful to see you on the Zoom Tuesday. All right, so we see from Alleyway321. Hi, Greg. I have Cubase and I love it. I'm anticipating learning Nuendo as well. Do you have any recommendations as far as offers through tutorials? It's been somewhat difficult to find them. There's going to be like very specific Nuendo tutorials that are available on the Nuendo YouTube channel. But if you have like specific things that you want to learn, probably 85-90% is going to be identical to Cubase. Anything that's available and applicable in Cubase is also in Nuendo. But if you have particular questions on Nuendo, please feel free to ask, and we'll be happy to answer those as well. All right, wonderful to see DJ FK and Nick on. It's great to see you on, Nick, on the Zoom social on Tuesday. All right, great to see Darren Flake on. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have Daniela checking in from Bochum, Germany. Great to see you on. Darren Flake says, I didn't know Cubase is funny. I created a template. I've been building it for a while. Cubase pop-up. A text saying enough routing is in here. I haven't seen that. If you have a screenshot, I'd love to check it out. All right, Da Vinci Girl just says, hi, Greg. What happens with you? I thought you have vacation, but I think Dom should urge to go on longer vacation after I read the headline of his today's video. So yeah, I was on vacation last week. And in America, we're not so good at taking vacations. I was discussing it with a European colleague, but generally most Americans do 1 week of vacation. So we're not so good as Europeans. We're doing 2 or 3 weeks. So I was out all last week and was back, got back from my vacation. I left Saturday and got back Friday, and then doing live streams Tuesday and today. All right, we're glad to read that Stella, Mark Rabin's dog, is chilling. All right, we have Martin checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. So Mark Rabin says, Greg, we need to get you a tablet or some display that lets you see the YouTube live feed as a participant in real time, and you're set up now that lets you attend to previous chat. So I can see the live stream in real time, but sometimes when there's a lot of questions, I have one that's kind of further back. That's kind of what I'm doing, as opposed to, I already have like 2 screens. So kind of having a real time one might be a little more confusing and having screen real estate, but I kind of use like a little Microsoft Surface Go to kind of read all the comments on a different computer, and I try to keep that, and that's kind of what I'm answering to. So, but I could see if I could add another screen. I could always go to a different browser tab to see the live chat, but I'm not sure if it would do much help for me and could just slow down me answering other questions. All right, so Miller Brown just says, Greg, hope your vacation was rewarding and restful. So yeah, we had a nice time and didn't think about work too much. So it was good. Felt like we were away and on vacation. Okay. All right, you see Daniela's wondering if there's a programmer on the live stream that could help with compilation work for, I guess, a plugin. All right, John Costigan says there's a special prize if you press the like button. And the prize is John Costigan saying thank you. All right, so we see from Roland stuff says, thanks, Greg. The chord pad arpeggio sustains now understood. And says, how rude of me. I didn't think to say hi from Sussex in the UK. Hope you're well. So yeah, don't worry about being rude. We're just glad that you're on. So we see George is, how do you even remember American music? You remember, your memory is astounding. I also remember, George, that you're a bass player, and I think you have a Chapman stick, if I'm not mistaken. So, but yeah. Yeah, I miss going to American Music in Bellevue. So it's a great store, but I'm still in touch with Reese on Facebook. He's now living in San Diego, closer to his daughter. See Diamond District Studios, glad he can make it. And he's checking in from Cape Town, South Africa. Okay, so we see from Sable, is there a way or was seamlessly extend or repeat audio tracks over and over seamlessly? So if we want it, all right, so let's, okay, so let's say if I, okay, so let's say if I want to have like something kind of loop endlessly, so let's say we have like, and then, so, you know, since, you know, Cubase is kind of set up as a linear, it's very easy just to drag across an event. But if you wanted to come over here, we could also, within the MIDI editor, we could set up something called a local loop. So let's just right click here. Let's see, independent track loop. I'm going to move this up here. So once we activate, and we can see this little independent track loop icon. So if we have the editor open, we could set up kind of a different loop point. So we'll see that while this, this drum loop ends at measure 3, and like the bass part continues on. If I set this up in a local loop, and I think you have to have the editor window open, so it's not super ideal, but let's say if we come here, so now this event can continue to loop. Even though it's not going on. So if you're just kind of writing based around a loop and you don't feel like necessarily dragging something out, which is pretty easy to do, you can put it in a local loop within the editor. And that works for MIDI parts as well as audio. All right, so we see George asks, is there a way to have recorded audio automatically assigned to musical mode rather than having to click on the note for each one? All right, so let's take a look. Let's say I want to take this, just okay, so let's see if I think, so I'm just going to route this to a group track. And then I'm going to record a new audio with the group track as the input. Okay, so I'm going to have this track in musical mode. So just this track right here, we're going to place it into musical mode. And we just have this track play. That would be helpful. All right, let me just record it again here. All right, so it's not automatically enabled. So we just I think that I could see the logic of not enabling musical mode, because if you're recording a particular track, so you could enable musical mode here, obviously, or within the pool. But, I could see the logic of not having it automatically enabled in music, like recorded tracks automatically enabled in musical mode, because what you recorded to was probably an existing timeline. And if and maybe you don't want to necessarily have that recording be, automatically changed based on a tempo change. But I think you might have to manually do it for recorded tracks. But I'll see if anything kind of pops in my mind with that, George. and see if there's a way, but I think you might have to manually set it, because probably if you're recording it to an existing click track, and then, so you may not want it to automatically be in musical mode. All right, so we see Rick from Bratman Studio says he enjoyed Zoom. So yeah, they're always fun and enjoyable. All right, so we see from Diamond District Studios says I recently bought Native Instruments. I want to start learning composition in Cubase. Any tips? Learning music theory is always, I would say, understanding for if you're doing composition, music theory, and study chord progressions is always kind of a great thing. But, just try different ideas, write something every day. Keep a bunch of little things, even if you think it's bad now, and it's not finished, write something every day, and just keep progressing, listen to other things and realize what makes an emotional impact for you and try to convey that in your compositions. But, any kind of functionality tips, please feel free to ask, and we'd be happy to show you tips and tricks on getting the most out of it. All right, my chat field jumped, so let me. All right, great to see Matt Elston on. See kind words from Mark Rabin. Thank you for that. All right, so Princess Layup, can I ask questions in the chat? So certainly, so just ask any question, and we will be happy to answer them for you. And welcome to the live stream. All right, Terry Gray asks, hey Greg, can you give a brief overview on workspaces? I'm trying to set some up with multiple monitors. Okay, so let's say I'm here and I want to create kind of a workspace. And we can think of a workspace as kind of like a pre-laid out scenario for us with different windows open. So let's say I am here and I'm going to be doing a lot of vari audio editing. So I'm going to come over, let's take this. I want to go to my view here. So what I'm going to do now is assign it to a workspace. I'm going to add a workspace, and we could have them be global, which would work in, projects, in any project or for a particular project. So let's say vari audio. And the project is going to only be for that particular project. All right. So now I want to come over here and do, let's do our hit points. Editing here. So we'll come over to workspaces. We'll add a workspace. Call it hit point. All right, now I want my mixer. So add a workspace. And let's say I have some plugins on a particular track. All right, so let's say, oh, I need to jump to the very audio. So we can just come over here. Okay, there's my very audio workspace. Here's my hit points. I want to go to my mixer. I want to go to my plugin views. So you could use key commands, and this will work across multiple monitors as well. But whatever functionality you want once you have your Windows set up, whether it's globally or you just want to just, go to kind of where you need to open up instead of opening up and closing multiple windows, that you could just simply save it as a workspace and think of it as like a pre-configured, like a preset for window layouts and stuff like that. So they could be globally set, so it works across multiple projects, or it could be stored within a particular project. Okay, so we see Marcello Castillo asks, explain harmonic shift please to edit E flat MIDI for instance. Okay, so let's say we have MIDI notes here. Sorry. All right, so let's say we're editing MIDI here, and a lot of times when we get to a certain zoom level, we may notice that this note may show up as A sharp 3, and this note may show up as D sharp 3. So let me just... Let me just see if I did change the preference here. Anyway, so if we want this to be, instead of showing a value of A sharp 3 and D sharp 3, if we have a chord track, I know that you may not have a chord track in your project, and let's come over here. So let's say we're in the key of B flat. Okay, so let's say we're in E flat here. All right, so now when we look at our notes, we still see it's A sharp 3, D sharp 3. So if we go to preference, I think it's going to be under... Just find a preference here. Okay, so we see, then if we go to preferences, we'll see chords and pitches, and then we could say N harmonics from chord track. So once we do this, now we could see B flat 3 instead of A sharp 3, E flat 3. So you may have to add a chord track, and then at that point it would automatically show the values in B flat, and based upon kind of the chord track right there. So make the chord track, go to the preferences, under event display, chords and pitches, and harmonics from chord track. All right, so we see from Princess Layup, hello, I'm having trouble figuring out how to draw out automation for the Vibrato controller of a Spitfire library. I made a controller for it, expression map, but I can't draw automation. All right, so, you know, what you could do, sometimes it may be a, it could be automation. So if it's automation, automation shows up in the project window. So even if we have a MIDI event, so, and this would often be for volume information. If we often, Vibrato may be tied directly into a MIDI CC, and this would be often entered in the particular what we call our controller lane. So let's say if we have, you know, it could be something like expression that maybe is doing your vibrato for you. So let's say if we have CC data like that, so a lot of times it'll default to velocity. And if there is CC automation, like MIDI, and CC stands for MIDI continuous controller, you'll see, like when we come here, a little diamond, and this diamond indicates that there are events with this particular MIDI CC message. So if the CC messages are contained within the parts, you'll see like this little diamond. Now that I select the diamond, I can come over here. I could select, if I hit the delete key, we can just simply edit these using our tools as we want. So if we wanted to just come over here, move, we can edit the CC data. So let me know if it's MIDI CC data or actual automation. I'm inclined to think that's going to be MIDI CC data. So, but if you could confirm that for us, that'd be great to know. All right, great to see Soren on from Sweden. See, George says, dude, how? Correct on all accounts. Yeah, I'm kind of cursed with a good memory. So, but yeah, you know, so I can remember just like really strange things like that. But yeah, so I definitely remember like, you know, talking with you and stuff afterwards at the clinics at American Music. So, and it's great to see you on the live stream, George. All right, Diamond District Studio says, please demonstrate and explain Snap Live input and scale assistance. Recently bought native instruments and want to compose in Nuendo. Okay. All right, so let's. Okay, so I want to set up my. Let's come over here. I'm going to create. Okay, so I want to come over. We'll go to within our editor. We'll come and we'll see within the inspector, we're going to have scale assistant. Okay, so what we could do is snap live input. So I'm going to come over here and we're going to set our key to say C major. Okay, so I'm going to now, as I record in, I'm going to hit an E flat, D flat. Okay. I'll just do it on a brand new event here, sorry. So again. So it's C, D, E, then. Okay, so now we come back. We could look at it and my so at that point we could just choose to automatically snap to our live input based on the scale. And now we could also, let's say if we wanted to draw in particular notes, so we could just do that, but we could also just choose. So now if we come over here and we could, you know, quantize the pitches. So at this point we could just quantize the pitches to the scale. So if I played a bunch of notes that, you know, if I was just kind of going, hit my black keys here, and let's say if I was in record, so now if we wanted to look at this, you know, we can have that automatically snap. We could also just quantize the pitches to automatically be in the key that we want. So this way we could choose to snap the live input. We can quantize. We could also, if we're kind of just drawing notes in, we could choose different pitch visibility. So we could say show pitches with event, or only show pitches that are in the key of C major. So if I change this to D major, we can see that these particular, you know, I can only draw notes in that are in that particular key. If we go to E major, where we have 4 sharps, we can just come over there and adjust accordingly, and we can filter the view just as easily. Okay. All right, you see Daniela just found a security issue with Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve. So. All right, so we see, can we set up trackpad for Zoom? So I think you can, but I'm not sure if it does like the pinch. But you know, what you can do is just come over here. So if you use, you could go up and down here visually using kind of the mouse scroll wheel. If we hold down our control or command key, we could zoom horizontally. And if we hold down the shift key with the command key, we could zoom vertically. So we could, you know, just using kind of the keyboard shortcuts with the mouse modifiers. I think that most people would always kind of have the mouse in their hand very easily with this. I think most people would use a mouse over trackpad for doing sequencing for lots of different editing. But we could very easily horizontally just control with the mouse scroll wheel, and then shift with control or command would allow you to zoom vertically. All right, so we have a question from Darren Mack. Would you mind showing us how to create a macro that applies a humanize function so that MIDI notes are not exactly on a grid but randomly aligned just before or just after? So you don't really even need a macro for that. So let's come over here. Okay, so let's take just a quick little drum part here. We'll take a very straight sounding. Okay, so if you wanted to do it like in, let's say like the key editor, you know, it could come here. All right, let me just try. I'll just do a new project here quickly. Hang on. Okay, so let's say I want to just take like hi-hats and let's paint them in as eighth notes here. All right, so all right, so you know, if you wanted to, you could go to like the MIDI modifiers tab here. So let's all right, so here we could just kind of choose to do random position, and this would just do it kind of on playback. I'll do extreme amounts here. But if you wanted this to so you could do stuff like that. Another thing that you could do, like let's say this is again perfectly straight, and if you just kind of go to your quantize panel here, so say okay, I want to choose eighth notes, and then you could choose kind of like your swing amount, and we'll just add more swing. And we'll add more swing here. So you could add now if we want to do it for like non-drum parts, if we go into the key editor here, we could just say we see our scale assistant. If we come over here and just choose quantize, here you could just kind of do random, you know, we could say, okay, let's just come over here and apply swing right here. So at this point, we could just say, if you want to do like soft quantizing, swing percentage. So let's say we'll do kind of a high swing percentage, and we'll say apply. Or if you want to do like eighth notes, So easy to do. And again, if you want to just come over here, let's say we'll go back to our original. And again, go to the MIDI modifiers. And we could just say random position plus velocity. So here we could just kind of choose your position to go slightly before, slightly after the beat. And that affects it on playback. So again, once we come here, and if we wanted to see that embedded in the part, we would just choose freeze MIDI modifiers. And then you could see how the notes get shifted. So the freeze MIDI modifiers would take these particular settings and embed them in the part. So you experiment with the MIDI modifiers, and I think you could find kind of exactly what you want to do. Set a negative and positive value and position for random. See, George Norwick says, "Oh wow, never saw that in Inspector before. You're a lifesaver." All right. All right, so we see from Sable Winters just says, Greg, that's exactly what I needed, and a drum loop I needed to repeat. All right. All right, so we see from DJFK says, would you play your drums in E, bass, E, or break E, bass, M, etc.? So, yeah, so I don't understand the question, DJFK. Maybe if you want to ask another way. All right, so we see Michael Teams sharing to Gareth and Pablo. Say hi. Hi to everybody, and Pablo is currently on the bus. All right, so we have a question from, I think it's Robbie and Becky. Hello, Friday Greg. Can you please show us how to create a continuously looping sample in the sampler track without beginning and ending being noticeable? I often get clicks. So it could really depend on the material that you are looping. So let's come over here and I'll just... I'll get a drum loop, but we'll try to find a new loop point. Okay, let's try this. So let's say we have all right, so we had the full sample, but let's see if we could now create kind of a loop. So let's do a continuous loop. So, and again, what I did is I just kind of just dragged over. So let's say if I take this and we had it set to no loop, that it would just So when we put it on continuous loop, we can see our loop point here. So let's see if we so that way it's pretty easy. So let me know if you're kind of doing something differently than that, or if you're kind of doing different material. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says, wow, that's huge for me. So not sure what it was, but glad to hear that was helpful. All right, Mike Braley asks, hi Greg, is there a way to use the marquee tool to highlight an audio clip and adjust the gain volume of the highlighted area? So I guess that's probably the range tool, I'm assuming. So there are ways to kind of just, so let's say if we grab this, if you hold down Shift and X and switch to the selection tool, just clear my throat. So if we, again, just, so as we do the range, if we want to, let's say, select the range, if you hit Shift X and then go straight to the tool here, we could adjust clip gain like that. And if you wanted that in a macro, it's pretty easy to do as well. If it's, so I'll show the macro in a second. If it's with automation, you could just select the automation and bump up or down, just like that. And even tilt. But let's say I want to, bump up by, 2 dB this range selection. All you'd have to do is, let's come over here to key commands. We'll make a macro. And we'll say range up 2 dB. So first I want to, we're going to split the range. We're going to add that as a command. We're going to go to the object selection tool. And then we could just choose to increment volume, I think. Okay, increment event volume, and this would do it in intervals of 1 dB. So I'll add that command twice. So now what we can do is, okay, I want this. I will now just run the macro. And you could just have a macro just come over here. And if you wanted to decrement event volume, you could do that as well. So if you, again, just say, okay, I want to take this and increase that by 2 dB, you could make a macro to do that very easily. If you don't want to manually do it. All right, so we see from Oral Monolith just says thanks. So thanks for joining us on the live stream today. All right, so we see John Black checking in from a very humid Japan. Says, Greg, thanks for doing a stream. So you're welcome. Thanks for joining us in the middle of the night from Japan. It's probably 3 in the morning. There you see Peter from Montreal, who's going to be joining us for a bit before joining his pool because it's 39 degrees Celsius there. Yeah, we have very similar weather here. I don't get to do the live stream from my local park pool. I should get that set up for next summer. All right, John Black asks, my question is there a way to manually set input velocity for my MIDI keyboard within Cubase, example from 50 to 127, since my NA Complete A49 either has fixed velocity to 127 or very soft keys? So you can set up, it seems like, that would be more of a controller issue, but if you wanted to, we could have Cubase randomize the velocity on incoming MIDI. So we'll come over here to our input transformer. So we want to transform, type is equal to note, and our velocity, I'll just do this from scratch so you can see it. So what I would check out is just to make sure what your actual MIDI controller, what velocity values are being transmitted from your controller. So if we come over to our MIDI inserts, we can see that we'll have a MIDI monitor. So as you hit the keys, like, when I hit the key harder, there's a velocity of 114. If I hit it soft, there's a velocity of 46. So, see what actual, what actual velocity ranges. So there I have a velocity of 127. So we can see what the velocities are. So if your velocity is going to be fixed on your controller and you want it to be random between, 50 and 127, to do that in the input transformer, we would choose transform, and velocity is a component of a MIDI note. So we're going to insert a note. We're going to choose velocity. If you just click on insert again, and we could say we want it to be inside range 50 to 127. And to access this, we would come over here to routing. We would activate our project input transformer. Clear my throat. And now, no matter how hard I hit the keys or how soft I hit the keys, I'll just hit the keys very soft, take out a loop, sorry. So I'm going to hit it very soft, very loud, soft, and we look at our velocity range, and then we could have the velocity range just set there. So try setting it, but it seems weird that your controller is only showing only doing 127. So check the controller to see if there are settings, but you could go again into the input transformer and set up something along those lines. All right, so we see from Daniela, DaVinci Girl, is there another method to control the zoom without shift and control key? So if you do G and H, we could do that, and shift. I know it's using the shift key, but you can just come over here and use shift G and H vertically, G and H horizontally. And I guess you could probably remap those key commands if you wanted to. So you could remap to zoom out vertically, zoom in vertically. You can remap if you don't want to use the shift key. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so we have from Cycling is Awesome asks, hi Greg, how can I change the project tempo so that all single tracks, MIDI, and audio are affected? So the whole project should change tempo, thanks. So one is, all you have to do is make sure that all of your projects, so let's say if we come over here to, here, let me just come over to, we'll take this, so we have audio, loops, all right, so make sure that we have all of the audio events in the project. We can make sure that they have a tempo, and I'm going to select all of the audio events here and place it into musical mode. So our tempo now, and we're going to make sure that our MIDI tracks are set to musical mode by default. So let's say if I... What did you say? And now I type in a new tempo here. You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years. So I'm going to speed it up here. Let's go to 80 beats a minute from 130. Let's go to 112. So I'm just entering the tempo. And now that all the audio files are in musical mode, go back to our original tempo of 91. So again, if you hit Control or Command plus the letter P, or go to your media menu and open up the pool, make sure that all the audio is recorded at 91 beats a minute. We can come select all the files and place it into musical mode. Check that on one of them. All selected files will change. And then just type in the new tempo as you're playing, and then all the tracks will play back at the newly entered tempo. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. It's wonderful to see you on the Zoom social meetup on Tuesday. All right, so we have a question from Sable, who asks, how do I set audio out to share with other music apps? Switching back and forth favors one over the other. I must restart to gain access to playback again. Annoying. So it could depend on your audio interface, but if you go to your studio menu to Studio Setup. You want to make sure to select your audio device, and you could choose try toggling release driver when application is in background. So let's say I'm playing here. I go to, let's say, a web browser. So we'll come over here. And I have this being routed to a different drivers, let's say.
Where we're going to be taking a look at how we can achieve.
And now I go back to Cubase.
In this video, we're going to talk about my minimal.
So, you know, you get, so that's, you know, so again, just come over here to Studio Setup and try toggling. When you go to the audio system, release driver when application is in background. And then because you're probably the operating system or other programs aren't necessarily, sometimes they're not using the same driver architecture as what your DAW is using, especially if you're on Windows. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we see from Robbie says I mostly use guitars or synths I played in most of the time. The beginning clicks. All right, so let's try just from like this with the sampler track loop. I think I may have an example here. All right, so something like this is maybe a little more tricky to do loops, but we'll try. All right, so I'm just going to kind of zoom in here. And let's say I want to take the loop. Let's find a start point here. Yeah, so, you know, when you're kind of doing this, you know, depending on if your source material let's say I'll set my end loop point somewhere. So, sometimes you have to kind of play around with it a little bit. And, sometimes what seems like it's the end. So you can see how you can kind of minimize it, but it's setting to kind of the loop points can be a bit of you have to kind of play around with it for making sure that the transients are kind of aligned to it as well. So let's so as you work with finding so we can see that kind of the underlying material that the underlying material here has more transients at the loop point, so you just kind of really play around. We'll try this last one. So like as you kind of just kind of check the transients on the loop points, and you can get those kind of dialed in. But if you have like a particular sample you're having a hard time, I could spend some time in doing it if you want to share it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so Mark Meador asks, what time does Club Cubase start? So it's always 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So we do it on Tuesdays and Fridays. Okay, so Walter Bowser asks, is there a silicone skin for Cubase 13 Pro to fit the M2 Mac Pro 16-inch yet? So let me know what you mean by silicone skin. I mean, it's Cubase is Apple Silicon native, but if it's like a physical, like if it's a physical skin, or if you're looking for like a software skin where you could have like the mixer look different. But if you could clarify that for me, Walter, I'd appreciate it. Might be able to help you out. Anytime my chat field just jumped. All right, so you see from Mark Meter, just thanks. I keep missing a show, keep never being able to have my questions answered. So you could always send questions in advance. I see Jazz Dude just wrote it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so you see from Daniela says, thanks for the remapping tip because the standard GUI that is given in Cubase is really a pain for eye handicapped people. Maybe a reason if this is improved by an update. As long old VST 32-bit and VST2 is still supported, for me it makes no sense to deal with new VST3. So I think VST3, obviously there's a lot of technical advantages. So you could run wrappers for 32-bit plugins, but VST2 is still supported unless unless you're running Apple Silicon Native, which I don't think you are. But Marcello asks, Greg, is there a way to emulate the rewire function now? So, unfortunately, the I guess Reason Studios is a company name, has decided not to support that anymore. So there isn't a real emulation for it. So you could reach out to Reason Studios and see why they decided to stop discontinuing it, or why they stopped supporting it. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, how to manage that if I have Cubase and at the same time like to follow YouTube instructions. Do I need a second sound card? So most sound cards will allow you to kind of go back and forth. There are some sound cards that may not do that, but again, just come over here, go to the audio system, and just choose release application when release audio driver when the application is in the background. Set that up, and that should do the trick for you. All right, so we see a quick question before I have to go. It's from Robbie M. Becky. How can I assure that I don't have T and S sounds in my vocals in a reverb, de-esser on reverb, or any better solutions? So I wouldn't necessarily put the de-esser on a reverb, but if you had something that was pretty sibilant, I may have a sibilant file that we could try it on. All right.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters.
All right, so pretty nasty sibilance. So if we're going to add this to a reverb to this.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, in language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, in language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, in language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters.
All right, so if I had to treat the source, I would, instead of putting it before the reverb, it's like solve the problem and put the de-esser on, and we could just come over here to tools and just run the de-esser.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base. In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
So just running the de-esser can make kind of a huge difference. So I would run that on the channel, not necessarily have those frequencies kind of carved out on a reverb for other instruments that don't have sibilance issues. All right, so we see from Walter Bowser's, I just see about the skins, the physical skin shortcuts. So are you looking for like a keyboard overlay, something like that? So I know that there are like, you know, specific Cubase keyboards, but I'm not sure if there's a physical overlay for laptops like that. All right, so we see from Roland stuff. So sorry, Greg, I've got our chord pad pattern question. Is there a way of previewing preset patterns without having to load each one individually into the pads to hear what they sound like? Thanks. So I'm not sure if, you know, it's previewable. But let's take a look. Just sorry, just. All right, so I think that as we go to the patterns, so I don't know that because the pattern is going to kind of interact with. So I think the pattern's going to need to be loaded. But I think it's not like loading up like a huge sample library. I think it's pretty. So I don't know a way to just kind of preview patterns. I think you just load it up, but it's such a small file and it's pretty instantaneous, as we can see. Even while the pattern is playing. So I'm still holding the key down and switching the pattern. So, all right, so you see Walter's kind of specifying it's a silicone skin for the keyboard. So yeah, I don't know of any that are done for that specific model, but there may be some online. I've never really looked for it. I just always kind of learned the keyboard shortcuts myself. But I realize that not everyone, it's not as easy for everyone, so. All right, Vincenzo asks, hello, is there a command to automatically move lines to different tracks? Are fades preserved? So I'm not sure what lines are, if it's like the waveform or the event. So let's say if I had a number of audio tracks here, and if I wanted to move this down, there is a nudge down command. So let me just go to the MIDI remote here, and I'll set this up. So if we go, let me set up my, so I'm just going to search for nudge down. And then there's a nudge, there's an up in a nudge category. So if you want to just remap that one, sorry. So now we could nudge up, nudge down, and if we have fades, those are automatically preserved. But let me know if that's what you mean by of moving the lines to different tracks. So you see Tim K about the kind of the skins, and he just went with the Logic keyboard Astro for Cubase and Nuendo. All right, wonderful to see Grant Nicholas checking in from Baltimore. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see Nick has to head off. He's wishing everyone a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I know we had some questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. All right, so we had a question last live stream about how to solo a track while it's being recorded. So let's go ahead and take a look at doing that. So let's say I want to send just put a new okay, so I want to take this particular track and I'm going to route it to a group just so we could internally record. And now what we want to do is to set up an audio track. And we're going to use the group as the input source. And I'm going to put another loop here just so we could see that it's going to solo. Okay, so before when we were recording, we had this track record enabled. And we wanted to solo just a record track, that this would solo the source track as well, so we couldn't just isolate what was being recorded by soloing. And the question was if we could hit like the Alt or Option key on the record enable. But I think that what we could do is actually just use the listen bus for that. So let's come over here to this. So now we could record the audio coming from the drone. And we're only hearing this particular track when we use the listen bus. And again, if we solo the track, this could cut off the input signal from the original track. Unless we had this like in solo defeat. So let's say we want this to continue to play, but now I could just hit the L on our record track. And this way we could only monitor the track that's being recorded. So instead of using the solo, hit the listen bus, and then you could just have that track isolated from the other tracks being recorded. So again, come over here, and we'll say we hear the drums playing. I only want to hear the track that's recording. Click on L. The other tracks will be muted, but we don't interfere with the routing of the tracks. And we turn the listen bus off for the track we're recording, and then all the other tracks will play. All right, next question we had was how to edit multiple MIDI parts together in the key editor. So someone wanted to have like a multiple MIDI parts and just kind of transpose. So I'm going to add a MIDI track. Okay, so now let's say we're going to duplicate this track, and for this track we're going to move all these notes up several semitones. Let's duplicate this track again. And now we're going to move these down several semitones. So when we want to look at all events, I'm going to look at my events here. Now, a lot of times when we do this, we need to put it into, there's going to be different edit modes. So you may have to come here and we can see multiple part controls. I'm going to move that up. And now when we go to our multiple part controls, we'll see this little icon where it's stacked, and we want to choose this to be all parts. So now if I select all my notes, I can move all three of those parts simultaneously. So again, I can just come here, I move one, all of the events will be moved. Or if I change the pitch, but we just need to make sure that this is actually in our part editing mode is set to all parts. then all 3 MIDI notes can be moved very easily. All right, next question. Can you show how to open a wave event in the audio editor? Okay, so when we are doing audio editing, there's 2 editors. One, the most common one that we have, is going to be the sample editor. All right, so this is usually what happens by default. So you double click an audio event, you go into the sample editor. If we wanted to go, now there's also a part editor. We can think of a part editor as often used for taking multiple events together. So let's say if I copied this event multiple times, and let's say at this point I glued the events together. Now this isn't a sample, but this is going to be a collection of events. So now when I double click on this, we go into a different editor. So most people get this when they go, I don't see my fade handles. All right, because they've often glued multiple events together and created what's called a part. Now we can also take a single event. If we go to audio, we could choose events to part. So as we do that, now I could double click and I could go into the part editor. So the part editor is also good for, I want to take different events here, put them into different lanes, and I wanted this to, almost like a super comping type tool, and I wanted this to do, my fade in here. I wanted this clip to be louder in the center, and I wanted this conversely to do a fade out, and I want to slip the contents within that event. So we could do stuff like that within the part editor. So, but if I wanted to take a single event where it would normally default to being in the sample editor, I would select it and say events to part, or we could choose conversely to go to your audio menu and choose to dissolve part. So if now we come here, we choose dissolve part, we double click, we're in our sample editor. If I wanted to do this for where I had kind of made this transformation of events, again, we could come here and choose to dissolve the part, and now I could take just the middle part and move it out like so. Okay. And some other questions around it. All right, so let's go back to our live questions.
Hello, welcome to the August.
Sorry, let me just turn the volume down here. All right, give me open up the live chat. Okay, finding my spot where I was. All right, Nick wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff says, thanks, Greg. My studio is being rebuilt and he's without a MIDI keyboard. Hence my questions about chord pads and using a mouse. It's really interesting experimenting with this way of making music. Yeah, also, play around if you're doing that with, the onboard keyboard as well. You can do a lot of great things, and sometimes have a completely different approach using different MIDI controllers. So sometimes you get unexpected results that are kind of out of muscle memory. So. All right, so we see Bratman Studio says, does anyone know if there's a Cubase 13 Pro cheat sheet that you can have next to you for key commands, etc.? So I think Jazz Dude has a lot, might have a list, but what you could always do, is just go to the key commands. Like if you want to know what a particular key command does, you could just kind of come here. It's like, what does Shift K do? And that will highlight the particular function. So you could just come here, Shift S, setup. Okay, we could do that. Or what does Control A do? And you could just kind of type it in and it will show like your particular function. So you could actually search by key commands, but I think Jazz Dude has a document maybe of all the key commands. But one piece of advice I always tell people is if you learn like one keyboard shortcut in Cubase a day, that would exponentially speed up your workflow over time. You see Terry Gray sharing advice to Sable about, he has Furman power conditioners, so he could turn stuff on and off in sequence, and he keeps his computer monitors on one, and that stays on. So yeah, I have kind of different. What I have in my office studio / lab is kind of different power conditioners, and they're plugged into smart plugs, so I could just tell, Alexa to turn off this, turn my studio computer on, turn this off, turn that off, stuff like that. And I could do it with voice commands using kind of Amazon Echo, which is nice because then you could be, if you're not in the room, you could turn down your studio in sequence just by talking to like a smart home device. So you see Terry Gray just saying part editor. Wait, what? Gonna have to watch that again later. So yeah, so it was kind of the Nuendo one way of where people would do comping that way, and some people I know still prefer that for comping. All right, so we see, hello, hope for the reply about Absolute 6 was sent an email yesterday. So let me just dig up that email real quick because I remember seeing it, but I'm not sure if I copied it down. Let me just access my email so I get that question. I remember reading it, but let me just... Okay, I think. All right, so he said a question, it was emailed in yesterday, a question, should I buy Absolute 6 if I already got Groove Agent 5 with Simon libraries and Amped Electra? Can you show some of the best things it does? Absolute 6 worth it. Some people told me many instruments in Absolute 6 are very old and sounds are not so good. I would say that's not true. And if I will buy it, can I sell my Groove Agent license, as I can understand that Groove Agent 5 is already in Absolute 6, and does my Simon Phillips libraries will be working with Groove Agent from Absolute 6. So your Simon Phillips kits will work with the license of the Groove Agent that comes with Absolute, so that will still work. Many of the instruments are pretty stunning, so you're going to get not only Halion with it, so as part of Absolute 6. So when you want it to come over, you're going to have the full Halion 7, so that's going to be probably the beast of virtual instruments. It's going to be probably the most comprehensive virtual instrument, because you could actually, instead of just dealing with synthesis or sampling, this actually has a full hybrid approach. So you have analog synth, wavetable synth, spectral synth, FM synthesizer, sampled instruments, granular synth, organ instruments. You can create your own instruments as well. So if you wanted to kind of start with an analog synth, you could just come right over here, say, okay, let's play that. Okay, now I want it to have different oscillators. At this point, we could just say, okay, we'll take this. I want it to blend in. And then if you wanted to do a filter section, you could just now come over and just choose a filter type, and let's say at this point, if you wanted to, just go to amplifier section. So if you wanted to come over, let's go to your envelope. So you can kind of do all of this synthesis. You can come over, and if you want to go to like your LFO section, you could just come right over here. And what do we want the LFO to control? You can just, very easily kind of come over, have that synchronized. And at this point also, the libraries that you get with it, so obviously Yamaha is kind of the king of FM synthesis. So if you wanted to, just jump back to load particular sounds, we could at this point just say, okay, I want it to come here, and let's just start playing with some of the FM synth sounds. So if you wanted to go to FM Lab, this is probably the most comprehensive FM synthesis. So we'll just mute this, put this on channel 1. So we're going to have all of your different operators are available. So you could just kind of come right over here, and you get all sorts of amazing kind of plus. If you wanted to run extreme, you could just come right over here, and we'll just put this on. That's just playing one single note. You can hear kind of the depth. But, also with Absolute 6, you get the grand, Halion Symphonic Orchestra. So it's, it's a very feature-packed instrument. So I think the Absolute 6 is definitely worth it. You would have to read up on if you could sell your license. I'm not sure I haven't read up on the selling your Groove Agent 5 license if you already have the license to someone else, but I'm sure the information is on the Steinberg website. But your Simon Phillips libraries would automatically work with the Groove agent that comes inside of Absolute. So no problems there. Thanks for reminding me about the email. Appreciate that. All right. See, Sable Winter says, Alexa creeps me out. She told me to calm down once. I tossed Echo out. Yeah, I have a cousin whose daughter is autistic, and she interacted with Alexa quite a bit. The Amazon called just to make sure everything was okay with her. So it's interesting. All right. So you see from Darren Flake, question, when importing audio samples into project, all of them are not labeled with either BPM or key. I get audio samples. Some of them I can use the musical mode, and some they shift to shorter samples. Thanks. So it's not necessarily the name of the audio file that determines if how it's going to relate to kind of like musical mode. So let's say, all right, so if we have a particular file here, and we could look at this in Media Bay. So I'm going to hit F5. All right. So sometimes the name of the tempo of the file will be as part of the name. That's pretty common, but that's not necessarily where the actual files, like that particular metadata, is coming from. So some samples may not have metadata at all. Most samples that you buy will have kind of the tempo as part of metadata. So when we select a particular file, so we'll come over here, we could see in Media Bay like all sorts of great information about it. So we can see, okay, this is going to be, it's an audio file. Here's the path. Here's the size, the tempo, the key of the song. So this is all metadata that's within the particular file. So if you have a loop that doesn't have this information available in it, then Cubase isn't going to know what to do. And these are pretty universal, so that loops from one source, the key, the tempo, the time signature, all that information can be embedded within the file. So as soon as you kind of drag and drop it in, you're all set and ready to go. But not every file is going to do that. So if you record files, as you record a file into Cubase, it's going to be tempo stamped based on the particular file. So let's come over here. Let's add an audio track. We'll call this tempo stamp test. Okay, I'm going to set my tempo here to 123 beats a minute. And then we're going to record. Now we look at our pool window, we look at our audio file, we'll do our tempo stamp test, we can see that 123 beats. So that information is embedded within the audio file, but we didn't tell Cubase what the key was, what the BPM. So if it doesn't have that, what you can do is just simply enter that in, but not every manufacturer who does loops does the right thing and kind of puts that metadata in. And if that metadata isn't in, then Cubase doesn't really have anything to work with. So See, Terry Gray says Absolute 6 is totally worth it. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Oxford joining us. Thanks for being on tonight in the UK. All right, just read through comments from DJ FK. They're kind of spread across. Make sure I'm not missing question here. But maybe it's, yeah, so maybe it's going with the content that comes with Cubase is all freely licensed for you to use. Okay. All right, so Roland Stuff says, me again, Greg. I can't remember how to edit an event within the track rather than in the edit window, but I remember it was great for editing one event, checking alignment against other events. Okay, so let's say I want to come here. All right, so I want to, let's look at this in our sample editor. All right, so I'm gonna put these as different colors or more contrasting colors. Okay, so now we want to kind of look at this. So I have both events. So let's see, I have, I'll show it on a different part here where it might be more, it might be easier to visualize. Okay, so let's say I want to look at my kick. And snare. So I'm going to hit Command or Control E. So now both of these events are selected. So if we want to come over here, so we could show the active clip, but there's also this little setting for show all clips. So once we do this, now I can do edits and use one as the reference. And then if we wanted to change, so let's say, okay, I wanted to change what the active clip is here. I could say, okay, now I want my snare as the active clip. And again, we could just choose to show all clips, but now we can look, I could do my edits just on my kick, and I could see the snare as a reference. So you may just see the clip display mode. Here you want to make sure that it's set to not show active clip, and you need to have two events selected, but you could choose to show all clips, just like that. So that way you could use one audio track as a reference for the other track. So we just see comment says, yeah, great. And Absolute 6 was included, Groove Agent 5, right? So Groove Agent 5 is part of the Absolute 6 collection, as is Backbone. And just says I already got Groove Agent 5 and love it. So if you love that, then you'll get more stuff to love. And I will give you, if you have a Groove Agent 5 license, you could have it licensed from your Groove Agent 5 or licensed from your Absolute 6. Tim Weinheimer says, last time we checked the price of Absolute 5, if you own Groove Agent, you can get a discount on the price depending on what version it is. So let's take a quick look and see. Yeah, so you can get a discount here. So if you do a cross grade, so if you have Groove Agent 5, Retro Log 2, Pad Shop, you can save money just doing that. So the Groove Agent 5 will allow you to get a discount on the upgrade to Absolute 6. So thanks for mentioning that, Tim. That's a great point. So with that, that may not give you 2 licenses of Groove Agent 5. That may just upgrade or do a cross grade of your Groove Agent 5 license, may migrate from a Groove Agent 5 license into the Absolute 6, but you save money doing it that way as well. Thanks for bringing that point up, Tim. All right. So Jazz Dude's still hoping for the 40th anniversary sale. Let's see when it. I'm sure when it's out, Steinberg will be letting everyone know. All right, so we have Pertti Komenen joining. Thanks for joining us from Finland. All right, so we see does all Absolute 6 work with a new licensing system and with new Apple Silicon processors? So it's all based on the new Steinberg licensing, and all of the instruments are Apple Silicon native. Yeah, so this year Steinberg is celebrating their 40th anniversary as a company, started in 1984. So I've been fortunate to be there for over 32 of those years. So seems like I was the new guy way back when. But it's been amazing to watch Steinberg's growth and transformation and what they've done. In a large part with founders Charlie and Manfred. And there's a wonderful interview you could check out of Charlie and Manfred on the Steinberg website, sharing kind of their insights of when the company was started. So many incredibly fond memories. I have so much respect for those two. All right, so we have a question from Frederick Hoffbeck. Hi, Greg. Fred from France. In Cubase Pro 13, is it possible to determine the tempo of an external song in Cubase? So yeah, all you have to do, we'll just come here quickly. I'll import quick audio file. So let's say if we have no correlation with the click track in this song. So if I want to do that, we can go to your project menu to tempo detection and say analyze. And now it's done a tempo map of a live performance. So if we want to come over here, we'll just, so this is going to be our downbeat. So it kind of determines it by the beat. And at this point, we'll just come here, and so it places the meter by default into 1/4. We'll say our 4/4 starts right there. So we can now just come over. Let me just make sure. So at this point, you can just. And now we can have our tempo. Now once we have our tempo, I could take a drum loop and have that loop be in musical mode. Drop this on the downbeat here. And now, once we select that drum loop, it's going to be in musical mode because I enabled that right there. So in that way, you could just have the different loops automatically match the timing of the track where you did the tempo detection of. Now, if we wanted to take this track and say, okay, our tempo is fluctuating, but is roughly like going from 120 to 137. So let's say I want this to be perfectly at, we'll say 124. I can go to my audio menu, come to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo, and that's going to embed all these tempo changes as metadata into this file. I'm going to bypass the tempo, or we could just come over here and create a new track version if we wanted to. And we could just type in our tempo of 124. So as we play, now the song is speeding up and slowing down and playing back at a perfect 124 beats a minute. Or if I wanted to draw in a retard, I could just come here, say, okay, let's come here. We'll put it into ramp. And we can say right here, I just want to do a retard. So now it's just gradually slowing down. Go right back to the original tempo, and you can do that for multi-track or stereo tracks. So yeah, you can definitely get the tempo of an external audio file. All right, so we see rolling stuff. Just says, thanks for answering all my questions this evening, Greg. Like button hit, of course. And now just offer a bite to eat. We'll be back on Tuesday. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you back on Tuesday. John Costigan saying, Absolute 6 is a comprehensive juggernaut of a package. All right, so we see question, is Halion 7 have any integration with Cubase when it's on, if routing, or if any other features for instruments? I'm trying to learn it more. Thanks. One of the best things to... Okay. All right, so let's say if we want... I think I have a project that's kind of set. Like, one of the great things with Halion is it's a software sampler that actually allows you to sample, which is kind of unique. And not just playback samples. Let me just look for a quick project. All right, so let's say we'll open up Halion here. So let's say I have like just kind of like a generic instrument here. All right, so one of the things that we could do is take, we're going to enable the sidechain input on Halion here. We can just kind of come over here. Let's choose that we want to do sample instrument. Okay. And then we could go to the recorder area here. Now what we want to do is we have the sidechain turned on here. We're going to take our sidechain input from Halion Sonic here, so this instrument. I'm going to record and enable both the MIDI, and we could choose our input source. So we could just say, okay, we want to do the initial sample instrument, our mode. We could do auto next. We want to start to be done with MIDI on, MIDI note off. So now I'm going to just come over here and I hit one note. I do my note off message. I go up chromatically. All right, so say we go there. Now let's look at our mapping page. So we could just come over here. Let's edit. We can see our samples that are done in the mapping page. And then it could automatically map other pitches. So that's kind of how easy it is just to map directly and sample straight into Halion and make your own instruments. So if you have like an amazing stack, you could just simply send multiple instruments to a group, send that group sidechain input into Halion, play note, and sample it, and start building your own sample libraries very fast. And then if you want to go crazy and make another and even create your own virtual instrument. So a lot of the instruments that you see are just actually done entirely. There's, it's not software development, but Halion will allow you to actually just make your own VST instruments with graphic design elements, all of that in one package. All right, so we see from Darren Flake, I'm watching a bit behind. Thanks, Greg. I'll add that when well, I got another device that snaps the same audio sample. Still thinking I don't need to write it manually, but thanks. Okay. So we see Frederick Hoffbeck just says perfect. Thank you very much. You see, I'll raise the music. Thanks for letting me know that it's soft compared to my voice. Just want to make sure I don't overload. See, Tim Weinheimer just says Steinberg spoils us. See, anniversary, so we see some say 1983, Wikipedia says 1984. So yeah, I think it's 84. They may have kind of started doing some stuff, but I think when Manfred and Charlie and Nicole Nicole did the graphic design and was Manfred's wife. I think when they all kind of quit their other jobs was 1984. Okay, so we see question, Greg, can you show the granular synth in Halion 7? All right. All right, so let me just go ahead and add Halion 7. All right, so, when we go to kind of the granular synth, we could think of this as being, let's see if I could find something. I'm not a great sound designer, but let's. Okay, so we have that as a sample. I'm going to drop it in here. And now we could kind of, if you wanted to start playing with, we could think of this as a lot kind of, similar to Pad Shop. But if we want to let me just. So any sample that you would kind of drag and drop in, you could adjust. But we could show you some of the other granular synths. So say if we just come here. I think this would be, the extreme would be granular. So this would be like one of the granular synths where or just be spectral, sorry. Let me see if I can remember which one is the granular that comes with it. Sorry for my brain cramp. So it's wavetable. Let me just. Here, we'll just try from scratch again. So let's go over here to grain synth. I know one of the instruments is, but let me just. But if we're just kind of starting from scratch. So if you want to adjust the sample, but, you know, and also you could check out, you know, to get kind of the granular flavors, you know, check out Pad Shop as well. Sorry, I'm just having brain cramp. Which one of the built-in Halion instruments is the granular? I always use Pad Shop personally. Let me see if I could. Yeah, sorry about that. But I always use Pad Shop, but it's, you know, very similar functionality of what you have in Pad Shop here. So, all right. So we see just nice comment from Graham Witchers. This Halion is absolutely wonderful synth engine to program, and he didn't know that it came out before Contact. All right, so I think we are out of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that kind of sneak up. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. All right, so it's August and it's vacation time in many countries and regions. All right, so we see Michael Teams saying Halion's coming into play in a new Hot Mess LP. We could get the long play record. All right, I'll wait just another. I know sometimes there's about a 30-second pause from when I talk to when you guys hear. So we'll give it a little more time, see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. And Jazzy is saying he's collected lots of Halion tutorial playlists in Discord, and there are many, many hours to watch. Yeah, check out One Man and His Song. I think it's just a wonderful Halion course, as well as all of his other tutorials. All right, see if there's any other questions. We'll wait just another couple seconds. If not, we'll wrap up. Okay, so I think we are out of questions. We will go ahead and wrap up unless someone just sneaks a question in. All right, so I want to thank everyone for taking your time to learn more about Steinberg products today. And whether you took a chunk out of your morning, evening, afternoon, appreciate it. We will be doing this again on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Just see some other comments just quickly coming in. So, I want everyone to, write a great song this weekend. Do some great mixing, editing, and most importantly, be safe and healthy. And we'll see everyone back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Everyone take care, and goodbye.